So in this video, I'm going to go over what are transition words. Transition words are transitional expressions that give writing coherence. That is, they help you to move smoothly from one idea to the next. In addition, a variety of transition words adds interest to the essay. In this lesson, we will practice using transition words. Transition words easily allows the reader to follow your ideas or arguments from one point to the next. Examples of transition words include coordinating conjunctions, subordinating conjunctions, and conjunctive adverbs. There are many kinds of many different kinds of transition words, and so transition words of similarity. Okay, so instead of saying, transition words of similarity are many different ways of saying and. So instead of saying and all the time, you would use New Orleans attracts many tourists. In the same way, San Francisco attracts many tourists. So instead of saying and, you would say in the same way. And instead of saying New Orleans attracts many tourists, similarly. So instead of saying and, you can say in the same way, similarly, or like San Francisco, New Orleans attracts many tourists. Or just like San Francisco, New Orleans attracts many tourists. Or you could use likewise, in the same manner, or by the same token. And so all of these are different ways instead of saying and. Here are more ways of saying and. Instead of saying Ecuador ships out a lot of bananas and it is an exporter of oil. So here you would say furthermore, moreover, likewise, in addition, also. So you would say Ecuador ships out a lot of bananas. Furthermore, it is an exporter of oil. Ecuador ships out a lot of bananas. Moreover, it is an exporter of oil. Ecuador ships out a lot of bananas. Likewise, it is an exporter of oil. So you could use all of these words, furthermore, moreover, likewise, in addition, and also, instead of saying and. These are known as additive transition words, or transition words of addition. Here you have different ways of saying but. So instead of saying Mary is rich, but John is poor. So instead of saying but all the time, you could say however, in contrast to. Mary is rich, conversely, John is poor. Mary is rich, on the contrary, John is poor. On the one hand, Mary is rich, on the other hand, John is poor. So these are all different ways of saying Mary is rich, but John is poor. For I have many students who write essays and they just write but, and. And so instead of using but, you would use however, in contrast, conversely, on the contrary, on the one hand, on the other hand. Mary is rich. On the other end of the spectrum, John is poor. Unlike Mary, who is rich, John is poor. Mary is rich. Similarly, John is poor. Mary's wealth differs from John's poverty. A clear difference between the two is Mary's wealth and John's poverty. Although Mary is rich, John is poor. Even though Mary is rich, John is poor. Mary is rich while John is poor. There's so many different ways of saying but. Mary is rich, yet John is poor. Mary is rich, nevertheless. So here you have different ways of saying yet. Mary is rich, nevertheless, John is poor. They all mean the same thing, by the way. Unlike Mary, John is poor. Compared to Mary's wealth, John is very poor. So here you have many different ways of saying but. So these are all transition words of opposition. Now transition words can occur in simple sentences, okay? Similar to New Orleans, similar to New Orleans, San Francisco attracts many tourists. Or just like New Orleans, San Francisco attracts many tourists. So you have subject, San Francisco attracts, verb, and object, many tourists. And so when you have transition words, you can use transition words of similarity in a simple sentence. You can use transition words of difference in a simple sentence, different from Mary. In other words, different ways of saying but, different ways of saying and. So different from Mary, John is poor. Compared to Mary, John is poor. In contrast to John, Mary is poor. And contrary to Mary, John is poor. So all of these are transitional expressions used in simple sentences. Here you can have transition words in compound sentence. So a compound sentence is when you have two sentences joined by and. And so here you would have, and by the way, use a comma before fanboys. So here you have John is poor, but Mary is rich. John is poor, yet Mary is rich. And then here you have transition words. Ecuador ships out a lot of bananas. In addition, it is an exporter of oil. These are all compound sentences because you have one sentence here and you have another sentence joined by a transition word. So these are all compound sentences. And so compound sentences can also have transition words. Here are more examples of compound sentences with transition words. The only thing I want you to notice is that you can either, let's see, what did I do here? So when you have transition words, you can have a semicolon and then a comma. So always place a comma after your transition word. And if you're going to combine two sentences together with your transition word, you should have a semicolon. So the semicolon means and. It's a shortcut for and. And what it does is it combines these two sentences as one sentence. It becomes a compound sentence. Okay? This is considered one sentence in English because I combine the two simple sentences together with a semicolon and with a transition word, because transition words connect two ideas together. Transition words connect two simple sentences together, just like a conjunction connects two sentences together. And so that's why transition words are transitional expressions that help connect ideas, and it helps with your essay flow and make your essay flow better so that you can connect different ideas together. Here you can have transition words in complex sentences. A complex sentence is when you have a dependent clause and an independent clause, and the dependent clause is a sentence fragment. And we always have, we start a dependent clause whenever we have a subordinating conjunction. While, because, even though, although, whereas. These are all examples of subordinating conjunctions. If you're not sure which words are subordinating conjunctions, then you should create your own Google subordinating conjunction list. And that way you have your own list of subordinating conjunctions. Why is this important? Whenever you start a sentence with a subordinated conjunction, it becomes dependent clause. Then it's going to need an independent clause to complete the idea. So this is why you should know the difference between a transition word, a coordinating conjunction, and a subordinating conjunction. So here, when you have a subordinating conjunction, then when you have a subordinating conjunction, you need an independent clause to complete the idea. So while Mary is rich, John is poor. Because Mary is rich, John is poor. Even though Mary is rich, John is poor. Although Mary is rich, John is poor. Whereas Mary is rich, John is poor. And these are all different ways of saying but. That's the whole point of this. So you can have transition words of opposition in a complex sentence. So here's more examples of complex sentences. And then when you get to your conclusion, okay, you would say, when you get to your last paragraph or right before your concluding sentence, you could say, in short, to summarize, in conclusion, to sum up, all in all. These are used right before your last paragraph, right before you restate your thesis. You could use these transition words to transition to your last paragraph or transition to the last sentence in a body paragraph. So here are some. And then you can have transition words of cause, condition, and purpose. So transition words of cause, condition, and purpose are different ways of saying if. So you don't have to say if all the time. John always knows where the emergency exits are if there is a fire, okay? So many different ways of saying if, in case of a fire, for the purpose of a fire, in the event that there is a fire, are all different ways of saying if there is a fire, okay? So as long as John knows where the emergency exits are. So as long as is another way of saying if. On the condition that there is a fire. That's another way of saying if. In the hope that John can safely exit the building. So that's another way of saying if. In order for John to safely exit the building. So in order for, in the hope that, on the condition that there, so as long as, for the purpose of, in the event that, and in case of, are all different ways of saying if. So that way you can vary your sentence structure and you don't say if all the time, and then you get a low grade from your English teacher who says, you're being too redundant, you need to find another way of saying but, another way of saying and, another way of saying so. And so that's how come you have to use transition words. That's where transition words come in. Transition words of example. So instead of saying, and this is, transition words of examples are also more ways of saying and. So instead of saying, many people are not aware of the seriousness of COVID-19, and students at USC were caught having large parties, not wearing masks or social distancing. So instead of saying and, or and, you would say, for example, in other words. To put it differently, as an illustration. So different ways of saying and these are known as transition words of examples, support, and emphasis. To put it another way, for this reason, for instance, in fact, okay? So all of these are different ways of saying and. And by the way, just as a notice, you could tell that this is a dated, I wrote this back in 2020 when the COVID-19 first started, so this is kind of dated. But anyway, it doesn't matter. The transition words, different ways of saying and, now that never gets old. Okay, so for example, in other words, to put it differently, as an illustration, to put it another way, for this reason, for instance, in fact, as a matter of fact. And then different ways of saying so, okay? In other words, John studied hard, so he got good grades. John studied hard, therefore he got good grades. John studied hard, as a result, he got good grades. John studied hard, under these circumstances, he got good grades. John studied hard in that case. So all of these are different ways of saying so. Many people think COVID-19 is a hoax. Therefore, people do not wear masks. So that's another way of saying so. As a result, under these circumstances, in that case, for this reason, then, consequently, hence, accordingly. All of these are different ways of saying so. So that way, if you're stuck with so, and then your English teacher says, oh, that's really redundant. Go find other transition words of cause and effect so you don't keep saying so all the time. That also lowers your English, your grade as well if you're writing an English paper. So you could have therefore, as a result, under those circumstances, in that case, for this reason, then, consequently, hence, and accordingly. And this is the transition words of conclusion, summary. So these are used when you are nearing the end of your paragraph or the end of your paper. To conclude, in the final analysis, in closing, to summarize, as can be seen from above. Given these points, in the long run, as has been noted, in conclusion, in short, people need to take COVID-19 seriously to prevent future outbreaks. You could tell that I wrote this in I think April or July. It was in July of 2020. Okay, so then that would and in July of 2020 this was current. But anyway, so when you have when you want to conclude, your paragraph or conclude your essay, you could use all of these different ways of concluding your paper. Transition words of time, chronology, and sequence. So here you would say, instead of saying, now we have 3 vaccines, now, you don't want to keep saying now all the time. And so here are different ways of saying now, at the present time, from time to time, sooner or later, in due time. And also these are different ways of saying eventually. So I have students who keep saying now, eventually, today. And you have no idea. I read hundreds of essays where people seem to just use one word all the time. Because people write the way they talk. That's how I can tell this is the way this person talks. Because, and so when we write, we have to vary our words. I guess it's okay when we're talking to use the same words, so that because you're in a hurry to express your idea to your friend, and your friend doesn't care whether you use varied words or not. All the friend cares is getting the idea across and getting excited about, hey, yeah, let's go to that movie. That's a really good movie. They don't care that you use now all the time. But if you're writing a paper, you want to sound educated. You don't want to sound like you're just talking. So that's why we don't write the way we talk. Because then to somebody else, it sounds as if you never got educated or something. So you want to use a more formal tone when we are writing to the teacher, or if we're talking to our boss. So here you have different ways of saying transition words of time, at the present time, from time to time, sooner or later, in due time, to begin with, up to the present time, as soon as, eventually. So many transition words in the time category. You have others that say consequently, first, second, third, further, hence, henceforth, since, then, are also words of time. And you can also, when you write your body paragraphs, you can say first, that would be your first reason, second, and then you could write your second reason, third, you write your next reason, and then you write in conclusion, and then you write your conclusion paragraph. You restate your thesis. How can we use transition words to transition from one paragraph to another? And so in these body paragraphs, I use both pie structure, but I also use transition words in the conclusion sentence to pivot from one paragraph to another. So here I will teach you how you can transition from one paragraph to another, and different ways in which you can use transition words inside your essay. So transition words are also sometimes called connecting words. Transition words help us connect sentences to each other. It helps connect ideas to each other, and transition words help connect paragraphs to each other. Using transition words help our essays flow smoothly. Caution, you do not need to use transition words after every single sentence. Use them sparingly. For instance, I use only maybe 1 or 2 or 3 transition words, maybe 2 transition words in 7 sentences, for instance. You don't have to use it for every single sentence. That's overkill, okay? So about 2 transition words per paragraph is good enough. So here is an example of pie structure. Now this is a little bit about how to lower your plagiarism score, but I know I'm going off topic. Yeah. So here you have some examples of how you can use your transition words. So here you have a paragraph where you have, actually this is a very good paragraph where you have a pie structure. It happens to have pie structure where you have P, the main point from the thesis statement. You have your one in-text citation where you have the quotation marks, and then you have the date, and this way you don't get your high plagiarism score. After you write your P for main point from the thesis, I, meaning your one in-text citation, then your 5 sentences about this one in-text citation. Then at the very end of this paragraph, you have your last sentence. So right before the last sentence, right before when you have your concluding paragraph and you want to transition to the next paragraph. So here, remember the thesis is lung cancer, throat cancer, stomach cancer. So here the second paragraph is talking about lung cancer. In addition, lung cancer is not the only cancer a person could get from smoking. People can also get throat cancer from smoking. So here I'm transitioning from paragraph 2 about lung cancer as I start going, second, besides lung cancer, smoking causes throat cancer. So here in your last sentence, you can start to transition into your next paragraph. Then here you would say, okay, besides throat cancer and lung cancer, you can also get stomach cancer. So you start to transition somewhere around the last sentence. So here I use the word finally. So whenever you want to, as soon as you use your last sentence, A, you transition to the next paragraph. B, you use a transition word of conclusion, like finally, in short, to sum up, in conclusion. And then you pivot to the next paragraph. Those are the two things I want you to know about transition words. It not only connects ideas, but it helps you pivot to the next paragraph. It helps you pivot in the last, and then when you write your last, I guess I don't have it here. When you have your last, your conclusion, all right, then you would write paragraph 5. I guess I didn't write that in here. You restate your, so you would have long, smoking, in conclusion, okay, finally, or in conclusion, either one, in conclusion, in summary, in short. Then you restate your thesis, smoking causes lung, throat, and stomach cancer. And then you're going to write 5 sentences that highlight, basically you're going to summarize, whatever I know this seems really redundant and you're repeating yourself over and over again, but that's the thing about English. English is not a hard language because it's like it repeats itself a lot. So as long as you repeat yourself in a way that it's not redundant, that's why it's important to use different words, different sentences, different transition words, not use and all the time, because in an essay, sometimes you do have to repeat your facts over and over again. So you cut down on the redundancy by not using the same words all over and over again. So that makes your essay more interesting to read. I will go over more about sentence variety and sentence structure in another video. This one I just want to concentrate on transition words. Anyway, so you're going to write 5 sentences that will summarize your essay. Then at the very end, you're going to write your reference citation. And when you write your reference citation, you need to have your author name, the date, you need to italicize, this needs to be italicized. Either you italicize it or underline it. Now, in the old days, we used to underline the article name, but then internet was born, and now people, when they see underlining, they think, oh, it's a link. So that's why APA changed it to italics. It's because people confuse the underlining with links. And that's not really that important because that's like old history, but it's just like now it's trivia. Anyway, so here you have, and then you got to put a period after this, period after this, yeah. Anyway, so then you write your article name, your publication name, date that you retrieved the website, and then you write your web address. And a lot of students, when they write in the forums or their papers, they just give me the web address, and that's not good enough. You need to also have the author name and all the rest of it. So I just graded a paper just now where somebody just gave me a web address and missing everything else. So that's a very common mistake in forums and on papers. So that's it, and that's I made this for a different class. That's why you're seeing their forum thing. Anyway, so I hope that you got a lot out of this video on transition words. If you have any questions, feel free to email me.